Why, hello there, beautiful listeners, and welcome back to Engineering Chaos, a podcast where normally my co host and I will talk about life as female engineers, give career advice to those coming up behind us, and talk about corporate America as it continues to screw us all. However, similar to last week, you've just got me this week because my co host is still out on her sick surgery leave. So you'll probably have me for this week and next week. But it seems like me clipping controversial things is working in my favor this week because I'm running a little competition. I think I mentioned this in last week's episode. I'm running a little competition amongst my socials, and some of the clips from last week's episode got people a little riled up. And I find that fun. So when I am here by myself and I can rail and ruffle some feathers, I am completely okay with that. But for those not in the know that don't follow us on social media, if you're looking for a cosplay this week, I am out of cosplay, but I was Moxie. We will finally be exiting the has-been and hell of a boss character realm next week. So next week's cosplay will be Buttercup from the Powerpuff Girls. Ashley and I were supposed to do that one together. I might just get back into that one when she comes back because I actually have a conference next week. So I won't be able to get into cosplay and record because I don't think I'll be able to record with her next week anyways. So it'll be another solo episode for me, and I think that's what I'm going to do, the asshole episode. So tune in for more engineering in my the assholes. But last week was a little bit of a ramble, and this week's going to be a little bit more structured. There is a topic I do want to discuss, which is this topic that's been floating around of a woman who interviewed for a vice president position with a tech company and got told that she did not receive the position because she did not put enough effort into her appearance. I put massive air quotes around that for those who aren't watching on YouTube because I do not consider not wearing makeup an effort into your appearance. And if you do, well, here's a middle finger for you. But that's just a sneak peek into my thoughts on that topic. However, I asked my co-host if she wanted to join in on that conversation, and she definitely had some thoughts and wanted to be a part of that conversation. So that'll be our first topic back together. There will be no wheel spin. We will be discussing that. However, it will be a couple weeks before we get to that topic. But we are discussing it. However, this week is going to be a little bit more structured and a little less off the cuff, but also still partially off the cuff. I did a little research and I discovered that there are some trending topics in the engineering world right now. Aside from Tunnel Lady, that was a wild time on TikTok when Tunnel Lady, who claimed to be an engineer and actually wasn't one at all, was tunneling underneath her house and all around her neighborhood. She claimed she knew exactly where her property lines were. I don't know that I trust that. However, we're not going to be discussing Tunnel Lady today. We're going to look at the top 10 trending engineering topics, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on some of those. I pulled an article from LinkedIn, which take that as you will. It's LinkedIn, on the top 10 engineering trends to watch out for in 2024. So let's see how the industry, or how people who are producing these articles, who may or may not be in the industry. This article seems to be written by Barclay Recruitment, which is interesting because I thought Barclay was a banking, not engineering, but maybe I just don't know things. So let's hop right into it. As we've discussed before, this article starts out with engineering landscape is evolving rapidly. No shit, Sherlock. That is the whole point of this podcast, is to talk about the different things as the engineering industry continues to evolve and evolve rapidly. So the first trend they mention is sustainable and green engineering. That is a topic we haven't really talked about on this podcast yet, surprisingly. And I can see how that would be a trend, sustainable and green engineering. However, I think whether that trend dies in 2024, here in the States at least, other countries is a different story entirely. But as a part of the engineering industry in the States, I'm going to talk on what I know. I think initiatives when it comes to that, sustainable and green engineering, Green engineering specifically will depend on how our elections in November go. There won't be as much funding available, in my opinion, for green engineering initiatives if the presidency were to switch to a more conservative presidency. However, that doesn't mean that sustainable engineering is going to go out the window with that. Sustainability is a big topic in most engineering places right now. How can we keep this thing alive longer so that we don't have to keep paying for it? And that is, I'm noticing that trend in my work, that more and more people are asking for longer and longer shelf lives on products, and they want it to be sustainable and have a way to maintain it rather than having to just build new and throw away. So sustainability, I could agree, is going to stay a trend that stays around. In this article, it mentions sustainability is no longer a buzzword, it's a necessity. And I would agree with that. Sustainability has become a necessity in today's day and age because we don't have the money to spend on engineering innovation that we once did. We want to be able to maintain and sustain the things that we are capable of building now. And we don't want to have to keep rebuilding and redoing and respinning the wheel, basically. So, all in all, from what I'm seeing in the industry right now, I would agree that initiatives in sustainability specifically are definitely a trend to watch out for in 2024, and something that if you're coming in from school or coming in as a newer engineer, you might want to get into, because it could be an area of opportunity for a lot of quick growth. Green engineering, I think, could be a risky. Companies will always exist in that realm, but there might not be as much funding for innovation and research in that realm if presidency were to switch over. That's just my thoughts, because green initiatives tend to go with the government funding. All right. So the next topic on this list is digital twins. We've talked a little bit about this when we were talking about automation and digital transformation efforts and things like that in our previous episodes. I 100% agree. I have no arguments on digital twins being a trend in 2024 and something that junior engineers and senior engineers, just engineers as a whole, should really be looking into and getting involved in, and how their specific disciplines can get involved in the digital twin efforts to ultimately, as the name states, have a digital twin of their products, so that not as much money and time is spent hands-on in the real world working on the products, and more is done in a simulation environment that you can control different variables and change more variables than you're capable of doing out here in the real world. Digital twins are a very big piece to the digital transformation effort we've talked about in the past, at least in the engineering world, because you save more money and spend less time on the physical system and doing work that way. So, digital twins, I'm not disagreeing with. If it's something you're interested in, I would start looking into what a digital twin really comprises of and how you can get involved in creating one in whatever projects you're working on as an engineer. All right. The next topic on this article is advanced robotics and automation. We've talked a little bit about this too. Automation specifically, not so much advanced robotics. I think I've thrown a few jabs at Ashley about robots taking all of our jobs, and talked a little bit about iRobot and theories from Ready Player One and things like that. But we haven't really dove too far into the world of robotics and how that's advancing with automation, and how we can remove jobs, for lack of a better way of putting it. I don't want to say that, but how we can make jobs quicker, especially in a production environment with advanced robotics and automation. It's unfortunate, but that is the way we're moving in the engineering world right now, especially in the production environment. More and more places on production lines are starting to be replaced with advanced robotics, automated systems, so that the robotics themselves can go check for errors and run the simulations and things like that to make sure that the product is coming off the line the way it should be. It is also quicker and less errors when you have a robot who is programmed to do exactly that task, going through the line and doing what it's supposed to do and checking for any failures as needed. There is not as much human error introduced into the production line, therefore you're saving costs, or you're saving money and saving time on the production line. And while not good for the economy and our unemployment rates, advanced robotics is definitely an area that, as a more junior engineer or as someone looking for something new in engineering, I would be interested in getting into, because that is where the future of production lines is heading. all production lines. If you haven't already started implementing robotics somewhere in your production line or automation somewhere in your production line, you will see that on whatever product you're working on in the next 5 years, in my opinion. Very much so isn't a trend that will die off. That is the way of the future for engineers. In my world, you'll be the engineer walking over. You'll be the engineer watching over the robotics and making sure that they don't break down or having to maintain them. But there will no longer be engineers or people, not necessarily engineers, but people on the line doing the hands-on work. That's mainly from a production perspective. Other uses of advanced robotics and automation, there's a lot of automation in the testing environment as well with new product development. So that automation will help us do some of the longer lead tasks that by hand could have taken 2 days that now can be run simultaneously in the background while you're doing something else. The productivity will improve with automation, and if you can get into the background of creating those automation scripts and being at the forefront of the changing of pace and the changing of development styles in your workplace, that is the place to go. These trends that they're listing here on LinkedIn are pretty spot on thus far. We'll see if there's anything else, but a lot of these topics are things that we're talking about at work, things that I've seen talked about in other spheres with friends of mine at different companies, and just talked about in general in the engineering sphere, whether it be on social media or at conferences or anything like that. These are the topics that are getting the funding. And that's really important if you're looking for stability in your job. Going with the areas that people are really interested in will help you be stable over time, especially with these advancements that aren't going away, despite some people in the higher ups really wanting them to go away. So the next topic on this list is the rise of AI and machine learning. Again, we've talked about this topic pretty heavily on this podcast. The rise of AI. There are so many things that can be done with artificial intelligence that, in my opinion, AI is more of a safety and security concern to us all than TikTok ever has been or ever will be. Our government should be more concerned about companies like the one that owns ChatGPT and Google's AI and what the AI can do in the hands of someone who is our adversary. That's just my thought, because the TikTok ban has been a whole big conversation that everyone and anyone that has any sort of content creation life has been involved in. And that's just one example of ways AI can go sideways, is security risks. But that doesn't mean it's going away. Unfortunately, we'll have to get through all of those hurdles and find out ways to utilize AI in methods that won't hurt us and ultimately will help us. If you are a software engineer, AI and algorithms is definitely an area of focus that, if it is interesting to you, I would put some time behind in school, in your early years, whatever it is. Even as a senior software engineer, that could mean job stability for you, because every company is going to need its own unique version of AI implementation. Every project is going to need its own unique version of AI implementation. If you understand how it functions, how to train it, how to build it, you become an immediate asset that ultimately could get you more money. Machine learning also important to that production environment I was just talking about. As you start learning about different failures and being able to put all those pieces together, your machine can now be self-sustaining and have less hands-on time from your engineers, freeing them up to do other things like develop new products. 3D printing in construction. I think the statement of in construction here is interesting, because I have a spouse in the construction arena and they don't seem to really be talking about that. It's not that they're not talking about starting to use AutoCAD and working with their engineers and things like that, but the people who have to implement the engineering design, yes, the engineers can use 3D printing to rapid prototype. Really, any industry in engineering can use a 3D printer to rapid prototype. I have one here at home as a hobbyist. I use it for cosplay stuff. I use it to build random things around my house. 3D printing is an amazing concept, and it is great for rapid prototyping. I've used it in a work environment for that, where you can create smaller versions, small scale versions of your product and do things, or even full size versions of your product, and be able to or not cheaply, because it's not exactly cheap, but cheaper, you for a cheaper price, you can be able to prototype out your product and do things like cable routing and space allocations and other types of fit form function development without having to build the actual product itself. So I would beg on this one, or I would comment on this one, that 3D printing in any engineering industry is a trend to keep an eye on and get involved in and start learning how to use a printer, whether it be a hobbyist one at home, the ones you have available to you at work if you have them available to you, getting into the more advanced features of printers if you've got the big hefty printers that they would use in a more commercial based environment, and starting to utilize those for your rapid prototyping, your testing, your in lab environments, your demo environments, starting to use those rather than build up the real products, because it can not only be costly to build up real products, but it can also be time consuming. If those products aren't available right then and there, you could lose time on your contract just purely because you're waiting for products, not because the work didn't get done. And that's where a 3D printer comes in handy. So I'm not disagreeing with in construction, because I think engineers in construction can utilize that, but I think it's more useful to those in the more day-to-day production type companies. That's my 2 cents. Those in construction may have other thoughts, because I'm not in construction. I've never been in the construction side of engineering. So if you're in the construction side of engineering and have thoughts on 3D printing being useful to your job life here in 2024, please enlighten me and drop some comments, because I'm interested to know how in a construction environment, because I'm not really seeing how it would be super useful there. I know how it's useful to me as a systems engineer, but curious how it would be interesting, how it would be more useful to civil engineering in the more construction environment than in a commercial production type environment. Thoughts? We are all different types of engineers, and there's different ways to utilize all of these things. So it's interesting that this one specifically calls out construction. All right. The next one on this list is modular and prefabricated construction. Again, very focused on construction. This one is interesting. Maybe because construction is a more costly, if you mess something up, it's more costly to both time and the contract itself versus development, where you are expected to fail sometimes. I don't know. It's interesting. If you have any insight being in the construction side of engineering, please feel free to comment and see why these are specifically mentioning construction. It's curious to me. Maybe Barkley is a construction focused company and I just didn't know it. Who knows? Anyway, modular and prefabricated construction. Prefab, definitely, I can see that being the way of the future. But just to read this little bit, because I'm not super familiar in how this is utilized in construction. Modular and prefabricated construction methods are gaining traction as they offer time-saving, cost efficiency, and flexibility, as do most of these things in this list. That's kind of the whole point. Most of these are emerging trends in the digital transformation world, and their whole point is time savings, cost efficiency, more sustainable, things like that. This trend is set to continue as demand for faster, more efficient building methods grow. So that's not necessarily, that could also apply to development. That's not necessarily the construction industry. It is more, can you prefabricate the things that you need to go put all together out in a highway or something like that, versus in the development world where can I prefabricate X, Y, and Z pieces all together as one unit rather than having X, Y, and Z all separately and then have to build them up into their own little system to then integrate into the whole big system. I get where it's coming from. I would say that modular, definitely. Prefab, not as big in the development world, but modular for sure is a focus that is coming out of the development world right now, because you want to be able to adapt systems as they age to be able to easily and efficiently swap out pieces if something goes out of business and you need to swap out that part that has been a part of the system for 25 years. Or you need to be able to make the system do something slightly different than what it already does, and you can take out one piece and throw in another. And that's where modular comes in handy. And it's, again, time savings on the development and cost savings on the development, because you already have your digital twin in most cases in newer development world, where you can easily do the analysis against what that change will create for you. So I don't disagree with modular and prefab. Definitely modular is more of the route that you're going to see, I think, in 2024 than prefab, at least in the development world. Prefab definitely probably comes in. Prefab will come in more so, in my opinion, in the construction side of this particular piece of the article. Internet of Things integration. Now, this is an interesting one, partially because we are talking a lot, again, going back to the TikTok ban, we're talking a lot about security risks, cybersecurity. That's become, I'm surprised that's not on this. Oh, I see it down at the bottom. I was about to say, I'm surprised that's not on this list because cybersecurity is a big trend. It's been building for the last couple of years as we get more integrated into a Internet of Things based space. You have more security concerns. And Internet of Things being a trend that a lot of engineers would get money thrown at, I can see, because you want everything to be able to talk similar to smart homes, right? That's pretty much Internet of Things. But instead of doing it just in the confines of your home, you would be doing it out in the real world. But I was talking with someone the other day, and they mentioned an Internet of Things being an issue with government control. I'm not saying it is, but it could be with something like Teslas. If the government can now shut off your car purely because they don't like how fast you're going, does that cause the citizens of the state any sort of concern? And that's kind of where privacy laws start to become an issue with Internet of Things, because once you're connected to the big wide world as your thing, now anybody has access. Not necessarily anybody, but the point being is people you may not want to have access. Is it a trend in 2024? I think so. There is a lot of look into interconnectability of different things and being connected to the hub, for lack of a better way of putting it, cloud-based services and things like that. However, I'm not entirely sure it should be in some cases. Internet of Things can be great, but there's also a lot of big concerns that come with it that if we don't have the right minds building it up, might cause us some problems in the future. It's an interesting trend. I don't see it as much in the development world really coming to play. I think more in commercial side of things, you might see a little bit more of it. Things, social media, app integrations, smart home type devices, AR, VR type of devices, where everything's all connected up, similar to, right? You have a Meta account. I run my Oculus, my Facebook, my Instagram. All of that's all on one big connected cloud account that's owned by Meta. Similar to like CapCut and TikTok being integrated, even though they're two different companies. There's a bunch of different Internet of Things integrations. I plan on using something similar to an integrated Internet of Things integration when I build my shed. So I can see how commercially it might be a good thing, but when you start looking into other industries of engineering, defense, you might not see it as much. So that's something to think about as you're thinking about your jobs, right? If you're interested in Internet of Things, maybe stay on the commercial side, because you're going to see a lot more of that where there's not as big of concern. Not saying cybersecurity and security isn't a concern out in the commercial world, but it's not as big a concern to those types of customers as it would be to the defense side. It is a give and take. But Internet of Things being on this list is kind of interesting to me because I feel like that trend has kind of died down. It's kind of settled. I haven't really seen a ton of new advancement on Internet of Things. It just kind of exists. And you can choose to hook up your product to an Internet of Things type network. But hey, that's my thoughts. Renewable energy technologies. That goes back to how I started this list. Renewable energy is important to keep looking into. I don't disagree. However, funding for that may make this trend die off faster than it should in 2024, just purely because there won't be enough funding to continue to advance in the way that we should in renewable energy. There will always be jobs, in theory, in renewable energy, some sort of advancement going on. That doesn't necessarily mean that it'll have a ton of funding for innovation and research if that's what you're interested in future years. It might be the time to get in versus later on in the year. That's just my 2 cents. It's definitely a big topic of conversation, at least in the world right now. So definitely worth getting into, at least for the foreseeable future. Who knows what type of funding? So you might be at a risk for layoffs, in my opinion, if you get into renewable energy right now. Advancements in material science. This is one you don't often think about, or at least I don't. I was never a big mechanical engineer type person, so I don't really think about materials all that often. I'd rather work with zeros and ones. But advancement in material sciences, I could definitely see getting a lot of look at this year. As we start looking at ways to make things more sustainable, materials come into play there. A lot of our materials are what limit our ability to create longer shelf lives. So I think looking more into composites, looking more at 3D printing type stuff, looking at how we reduce our waste in our materials, how can we cut them more efficiently, what types of materials can be biodegradable in some cases, is an area that will probably get some funding. I wouldn't say it's top priority in this list, but definitely something some groups are looking into depending on the focus of their project. I think cars specifically are looking, the car industry, I could be wrong on this, but this is just my opinion. I think the car industry is looking into more reliable, cheaper materials as car prices continue to drive up. If you can find materials that you don't have to replace and maintain as often, then you've got a pretty good sell for people who don't want to trade in their cars lately. Again, in the kind of development world, you could be looking at what materials are going to reduce my weight. Weight has been a big concern in the aerospace industry for a very long time. How can I get materials to reduce my weight, reduce whatever other aerodynamic properties I need to reduce to make this thing perform at the level that I need it to? So I can definitely see how that would be fun research if you're a new engineer. Although I don't know that just because it's a trend to be looking into, there's going to be a lot of jobs open in that area. Then cybersecurity is the last one on the list. And honestly, I think this is the biggest of the ones on this list. Cybersecurity is probably the biggest area open with jobs right now. There are not a lot of cybersecurity experts, and there are a lot of people worried about our cybersecurity and how do we assess those threats and how do we make sure we don't get hacked by our adversaries or just hacked in general for people wanting weird, dumb information. And that's where cybersecurity is. Pretty much every industry of engineering needs cybersecurity. Anything that deals with Internet of Things needs cybersecurity. Defense obviously needs cybersecurity. Your green initiatives need cybersecurity because if you're running off of a grid, you need to make sure your grid doesn't get hacked. I can't think of an industry off the top of my head that doesn't require cybersecurity to ensure safety of those involved with that product. So, in my opinion, this trend should be number one on this list because it's not going away. If anything, that industry is just going to continue to get larger and larger. So if you're a software engineer with that background coming out of school, cybersecurity is probably going to be your biggest bang for your buck next to AI and then AR and VR tech. To me, those three categories are where our engineering trends are going. Because yes, digital twin is on this list, but without some of the other tools that are on this list, digital twins are impossible. So we need people who know cybersecurity really well or can be taught cybersecurity to do their job really well. We need algorithm designers and AI designers. And I say designers just as a general term. We need people who can work in those fields to really be able to advance our projects in a way that meets timelines that are already tight. Fast paced workers. These trends, if you notice as we went through them, are all about time efficiency. And that requires people to be good at their job and know what they're doing. And the people training the people who don't know what they're doing to be good trainers and good teachers. And we've had a lot of conversation about good trainers and good teachers. But I would like to close with how this article ends, which is staying ahead of the engineering curve. For professionals and businesses in engineering, keeping up with these trends is not just about staying relevant. It's about leading the charge into the future. I could not agree more. You have to be a leader at the forefront of these to be able to stay ahead and stay ahead, in my opinion, of the potential layoffs that come with some of these advancements. If you become a useless job because AI took over, what are you going to do now? Whether you're looking to advance your career or seeking to innovate within your company, understanding and embracing these trends is essential. Even the recruiters are saying it. It's not just I've gotten a lot of heat for saying a lot of things that don't make sense on this podcast, but what I've been saying is right here lined out in a LinkedIn article. Yes, it's a LinkedIn article, but people are saying it. Recruiters are saying it. These are the trends that we're looking at in the engineering industry, and you have to be able to keep up and make change. And this engineering trend is a little wild. Our industry is changing every damn day. Not one day is the same. There's some new initiative that comes down every day. Something new that we have to adapt to, learn from, and be able to implement in a short amount of time. Those technologies that I just talked about are going to start sending them our way any and every day now. It will adapt quicker than we can keep up. And you need to be at the forefront now, or else you're going to be behind a week from now. And that's kind of the general feel for the engineering trending topics. I don't really know how I feel about that article, but I do know that it seems that this podcast is on the right thought. We are talking about the topics that matter. We're just not getting ourselves out there as quickly as we would need to. We're fighting against the algorithms. We need a better understanding of them. Lack of a better way of putting it. We are engineers who are working in a fast-paced environment, and we want to be able to help those coming up understand things that we didn't when we started. And talking about things like this, but also silly things like the no makeup thing as females. There is a lot in this space that is impacted, whether people want to admit it or not. Being in a 70-30 environment where 70% of it is male and 30% is female, as a female, is difficult. And those are topics that do come up on occasion in this podcast. I would love to say that it's all happy and go lucky, but obviously last week it wasn't. Last week I was talking about a whole bunch of random shit about how your companies don't care about you and how we should all revolt. And it's funny the responses I got on the social media because of some of that. We need strong voices in this industry, especially as females. But we also need strong voices of the male variety in our corner. And not all of our coworkers are going to be in our corner with us. But to be strong in this industry, you need to be in one of these trending topics that I talked about today. You need to be involved in getting digital twins built, model-based, digital transformation efforts like digital twins, AI, automation, AR, VR. While I can make jokes all day, every day on this podcast about our world turning into Ready Player One and iRobot, that doesn't mean these technologies aren't important to our everyday lives as engineers. This article, when was this? Hold on, let me take a look. When was this article published? This article was published in November of 2023. So this was their predictions for 2024. And here we are 3 months into 2024. And I can say almost all of these things are a focus at my place of work, at my co-host place of work, and in the industry as a whole. There are countless jobs. If you go and look at, this is a bad example, but if you go and look at Meta's website, most of the jobs that they have available are in their Oculus VR technology department. They are throwing a lot of money at the metaverse and the hardware that comes with entering the metaverse. Because right now, a lot of people's complaints with AR VR is the headsets. How often do I have to wear those headsets? Or can we make the headsets any more comfortable? Because right now they're big and bulky. They're getting smaller with each new rendition of the VR headsets, but they're still pretty big and bulky. Not gonna lie. They're hard to wear for extended periods of time. If I were to be doing my entire workday from a headset, I would probably have the headache by the end of the day. And that's what they're throwing a lot of their money and innovation at. To be able to, as some people have joked, turn a VR headset into contact lenses. I don't know that that's ever going to be a reality, truthfully. I really don't know that we could get that small, but it's innovative. If that is the case, it would be better. I could see glasses like the blue lights, but for your augmented reality. That's the type of tech our industry is looking at right now. I had someone approach me in my family about looking into a sensor that would be commercially available to be able to predict people's teeth health so that you didn't have to go to a dentist on a regular basis. Not saying you shouldn't, But you wouldn't have to, because you could diagnose yourself at home with this commercially available retainer sensor system. So many questions came up when that topic was brought to me, and it's an engineering project that I would love to get into if I could find the funding. But that's the type of things that if I honestly tried to go get the funding and worked with them on building, I probably could get the funding for. Because if you can reduce people's time from having to spend time going to a dentist, they could do the checkups and have to do it far less regularly because they have this sensor at home to tell them what's wrong. It involves AI. You have to be able to train the AI to all these different types of teeth abnormalities for whatever it is. It involves sensors, which advanced technology, automation, maybe even if you're looking at the production line of building all of that. It involves all these new technologies I talked today if you were really getting into commercially building a product like that. From start to finish, your best, cheapest way to build any new product is, in fact, these trends that been talked about back in November. 3 months in, the only ones that I can really question at this point are green initiatives. And it's not because those aren't important, it's just because funding with those tend to come with who is willing to fund them at the government level. There's not usually a ton of regular, in my opinion, I haven't actually worked in that industry, but from what little experience I have researching that, there's not usually a ton of funding available at the non-government level for initiatives like that. There's companies don't open jobs for initiatives like that when there's not funding. So there's not going to be a lot of innovation because funding is light in the case that a more conservative funding perspective came to be. So that's really the only ones that I can question at this point, having a ton of advancement, a ton of jobs, a ton of focus thrown at them in the next year to 5 years. Our industry is rapidly moving. Everything changes. And everything you knew even 5 years ago is changing today. So if you are in school, what they're teaching you in school is probably not what you're going to see in the real world. Unless you are at a very technologically advanced school that has all the tools available to you to be able to develop things like algorithms and AI simulators and VR type products. As a software engineer and as a hardware-based engineer, you probably will be lost coming into your first couple years because there will be so many tool involvement and advancements when it comes to your analysis and your development and everything. Because every company is unique in this situation too. Not everyone, most have a standard tool set that they'll use, but on the off occasion, you'll find a company that uses something completely different. And now you have to go restart your entire thought process because you used this one tool in school and now you're using these 3 other ones at work now that you're out of school. There is going to be a giant learning curve for you coming into any of these industries. But in my opinion, if I were going back to, I'm a senior in college about to get ready to go into the workforce, I would look at my top 3 based on this list would be cybersecurity, VR. Because those are the 3 I personally, right now, see being the biggest players in all of the industry, no matter what grouping of engineering you're in, what company you work for, what version of the industry you're in. Those are the 3 that I foresee everybody needing, everybody utilizing, and everyone struggling to implement. Because AI all have cybersecurity concerns. So the 3 all play together. You'll struggle to implement AR, VR, and AI because of the security risks that they pose in some scenarios. VR can be used, specifically AR more so than VR, but VR can be used in a test environment as well. AR can be used in a production environment, similar to the automation and autonomous robotics. Building that plus implementing AR for your actual technicians that may still have to remain on the line because you can't get a robot to do the product or to do the step in the procedure for that particular production environment. AR will help because you can do something like overlay your design that they can follow. All of these things are so very deeply integrated and they're a tight little ball. And in my opinion, those are the most job categories that are most hurting right now because it is hard to find someone to fill those roles, in my opinion. Obviously, every company has its own unique needs and its own unique situations, for lack of a better way of putting it. But from where I stand, those three categories are going to continue to grow over the next couple of years, are a great opportunity to get at the bottom floor. Not a lot of companies have really fully integrated any of these things yet. Cybersecurity still being pretty new, but more implemented than the other two things. And it is a fountain of knowledge when it comes to advancement and your ability to grow quickly, because you're going to have to. There's not going to be very many people ahead of you that know what they're doing. I'm not saying there's nobody, but it's few and far between in those categories, similar to few and far between in the model-based world that my co-host and I come from. And you're going to be able to grow in unbelievable ways and probably find yourself in leadership roles earlier rather than later, just purely because you're one of the only people that know what the hell they're doing when it comes to implementing and integrating those types of technologies. That is my 2 cents on the top 10 trending topics in engineering in 2024. Get into them, because I don't disagree with anything that article said. I think some are more secure than others when it comes to future advancement, rather than them just being a trend. I think some of them are here to stay and they're not going anywhere, and others might just be trendy at the moment. And I think as this year continues to evolve, or as this year continues to evolve, and we know more and more about where funding is going for certain types of these projects, the more my discussion on this will probably evolve. But like I said, cybersecurity, AI, VR aren't going anywhere, and they have the most jobs available in any and all industries at this point. That's where you want to look, especially if you are not fond of being in any particular version of the industry. You have the most opportunity in those topics to find a job outside of certain groupings of the industry. And that is all, I believe, this week. I will be back with cosplays and hopefully my co-host probably early April, maybe mid-April. But until then, you have just me. I will be doing an Am I the Asshole episode next week where we can discuss all of the funny Am I the Asshole engineering edition people, because last time it was just absolutely hilarious. Last time I realized just how dumb and how entitled. I have always assumed that engineers are entitled assholes, but Lord have mercy, did I get an earful the last time we did an Am I the Asshole episode. So I will do my research again for next week's episode. This one is short, but it's an episode nonetheless. And we will get an Am I the Asshole out, and then hopefully I will have my co-host back, because I miss her, and it's very hard to do these alone. I like being able to bounce off of other people and have conversations, and not just talk to myself staring at a camera. But as always, if you enjoyed this content, please go out and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Engineering Chaos Pod. Don't forget, we have a new YouTube. We have our own YouTube now, and we're growing it slowly but surely. And if you need any help with your health and fitness goals, you can always reach out to me at It's Coach Casey on just about everything as well. And if you want to check out some more of my cosplay stuff, I also have a YouTube and a TikTok for that. I couldn't tell you what the handle is off the top of my head, though, so go to one of the other pages and you'll probably find it. But that is all for this week. And hopefully you'll only have one more week of just me, so that you don't get sick of me, if you're not already. But that is all, and we will be discussing the makeup controversy that has been going around on TikTok when my co-host gets back. So that is all for this week. Goodbye, my lovely chaos gremlins.